Well, good morning. Welcome to the July PKI Solutions webinar. This is a very special event. As you can tell, it's not our typical layout. Our PKI Insights are usually our internal team bringing you really interesting topics. We have an amazing topic, I think, and we wanted to do this a little differently. Today, I am joined by Brian Komar. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the past, present, and future of PKI, but this is also a celebration of Brian. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to go through today. As is typical in our PKI Insights, we do welcome questions. We'll be collecting those and going through them as we can in the agenda. If we don't get through them, we do have a Q&A at the end of the session today. And we'll also do our best to follow up afterwards as well. Through the session today, we'll have a few polls that will come up, trying to help make sure our content is relevant to you and that we're delivering really interesting information. Also, at the end, we've got a couple giveaways that we'll talk about. We have a training promotion going on, so we'll talk about that as well. But before we go to Brian, let me introduce myself. If you don't know, I'm Mark Cooper. I'm the president and founder of PKI Solutions. And joining me, Brian Komar, who is one of my personal heroes, being in the PKI space. But for those of you that may not know Brian, Brian is what I would call one of the original influencers in the PKI space. So
Thanks.
You wrote the Microsoft Press Windows Server 2003 PKI book. Yep. Followed up with the Server 2008 book. As I learned last night, and I never quite knew for sure, you also wrote the Microsoft PKI course, the 2821C course.
Yeah.
So very much involved in the PKI space, very much with certificate services. Your company, Komar Consulting, was one of your ventures that you had over the years. But very glad to have you here today.
Thanks very much, Mark.
And this is also a little bit of a celebration. This is your retirement. You are.
Yeah.
You've done all that you can do in the PKI space.
I've done as much as I'm willing to do.
As much as you're willing to do.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that we have people that are joining us today that have either worked with you on projects, maybe came to one of your sessions at a conference. You've been all over the world. Probably read your book.
Yeah.
I know that. There's very few people that I have encountered over the last 20 years in this space that hasn't known your name. So it is an honor to be sitting down with you today.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, it's kind of funny being a guy who grew up in Winnipeg, Canada, who had just really a one-man shop.
Yeah.
For most of my career, and getting called to Australia, Europe,
yeah.
Asia, predominantly U.S.
Yeah.
Very little in Canada. It's kind of weird, but what else are you going to do in the winter other than cryptography?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's a great segue. If we kind of talk a little bit about how you got started in this space. I mean, what got you into PKI other than being in Canada and cold and having nothing else to do?
It was a long and winding road, to be honest. My actual university training was in actuarial mathematics.
Yeah.
And I was working at an insurance company, and my boss put in a Novell network and said, "You seem to know how to type," and threw a bunch of orange manuals at me.
Yeah.
And suddenly I moved towards networking. And I moved, changing careers. I was a 3-year guy. I'd switch every 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I was at a little consulting company. And a friend got me into editing books for McNally Robinson.
Okay,
That was a book company, but Macmillan Publishing. And they got me into it. I ended up speaking at a conference in Spring Comdex in Chicago. We talked about last night.
Yeah.
And I ended up meeting two people from Microsoft, Andreas Luther and Nadine Kano.
Okay.
And they set me up to come over to Microsoft as a consultant, contractor, working with Microsoft Learning. And I had a security background at that time. I was working with firewalls a lot, security audits, so kind of moved into IT, and security just seemed to be a niche that I liked.
Sure.
And one of the courses we wrote was a security course. And that was my whole goal, is to get an actual security course for Microsoft. And one of the chapters was a PKI chapter. And ends up this one friend of mine who was a PKI consultant
Yeah.
at Boeing, David Cross, who
Oh,
we
yeah,
both
yeah,
know very well.
yeah.
He became
The product manager.
product
Yeah.
manager for PKI right at the same time. I can't remember his predecessor, Rajesh, I think it was, Rajesh Kara.
Okay.
And they wanted me to write a course for MCS because in 2003, Whistler,
Yeah.
there was going to be PKI that you actually had to know some shit
Yeah.
and do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got involved
Yeah.
with PKI.
Yeah.
Working with David. David wanted to get more out there, more documentation, make it
Yeah.
somewhat easier.
Yeah.
So we wrote white papers. Then we got the idea, let's create our own course.
Yeah.
So it was actually the product team that was
I
in
get you.
charge of
Yeah.
2821.
Yeah.
And we had Microsoft Learning doing it. So it was a very different experience.
Yeah.
Microsoft Learning found it very difficult because we were in charge, not them.
Yeah.
And it changed from what's need to know to nice to know.
Yeah.
We got to flip that a little bit.
And I remember the problem with that course wasn't so much the content; it was always a lack of instructors, because it definitely wasn't one of those that you could take an unknowledgeable person to teach the content. Because all that they would do is just read the slide. So now you needed expertise to be able to actually answer the thing or figure out why that was.
Exactly. And what happened is, writing that course, which led to writing the book, we kind of used the course as a backbone, kind of an outline towards the book.
Yeah.
But once I did that, I got asked to join the Security Center of Excellence with Laurie Wohler, my boss.
Sure.
And they needed me to consult because I had to teach other MCS consultants. They didn't have consultants even at MCS to do the PKI consulting.
Yeah.
So I was shipped out, and everybody has this misconception. I worked for Microsoft. Microsoft was my customer. I never once was an employee at Microsoft.
Although I will say, when I was at Microsoft, I was an employee. You would do contract stuff. You were on email distribution lists that were generally only employees. So it was a gray line, even for a lot of people, unless you kind of dug in there and you realized.
Well, if you looked at my email address, it was V-B Komar, vendor, right?
Yeah.
So it was always that case that I was the vendor of it.
Yeah. We're getting some feedback on your shirt. So I think that the nice thing is, as you go into retirement, you don't have to worry about the work apparel anymore.
Well, actually, this is what I wore my last 15 years. If you're a customer of mine, I wore Robert Graham. I wore bright stuff. And this is the way. Yeah. So what am I wearing today? Will Stiles from Palm Springs. There you go.
Would you go to conferences and put a sport coat on and have a shirt on underneath?
No. I always wore the speaker shirt.
Oh, okay.
Whatever the speaker shirt was, those ones I wore. But my consulting, I think it was 2010, the last time I wore a suit jacket.
Yeah.
Last 15 years, it was always just a fun shirt.
Well, I mean, you've been around long enough. You probably could have gone even like the Steve Jobs approach and just gone to like a turtleneck. Like it doesn't matter what you wore. You could have probably showed up in like shorts and loafers. You got shorts and Crocs and
no
a
Crocs,
tank top,
no
and
Crocs,
people were like, that's all right. The rest of us kind of have to have that appearance. So it sounds like very much like, for me, it was a little bit of an accidental exposure into PKI. It wasn't like someday I want to grow up and be a cryptography guy and do PKI.
Yeah, no, you know what? I have a strong background in writing. I had great English teachers, of all things, back in high school.
Yeah. So
really, I consider myself a technical writer, a person who could express himself both vocally and written methods to get points across.
Yeah.
And I think that's the strength. And the whole thing is, PKI is about policy and process.
Yeah.
It really, yes, we do low technical bits, we write low scripts and do things, but when it really comes down to it, are you following procedures.
Yeah.
You write a process, you follow it.
Yeah. And that's probably the distinction. We talk a lot about the click next kind of install, right? Where
Yeah.
Microsoft almost made it too easy because you can hit the buttons and get the technology installed, but without the policies, the process,
Yeah.
there's no construct because it's all about trust. It's about integrity.
Yeah.
And you can't have that without really understanding what you're putting into the system or what you're getting out.
Well, yeah. Like I set up government PKIs. I set up defense contractor PKIs where we had auditors in the room.
Yeah.
And I remember for one, the auditor was brought in the day of the deployment. Well, guess what? We failed.
Yeah.
Before we even started, we failed. The guy just goes, I'm sorry, there's no cameras on the cage. There's not 2 locks. There's an OS on this box. How the heck did it get there?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you learned that the process is very important. And that's where even I learned more and started to write even more procedures.
Yeah.
If you're a customer of mine, like you joked, Mark's taken over a few of my customers now, and I'm passing a torch to him, and I'm really happy that you're taking them because they're in good hands.
It's always daunting. Unlike going into a PKI that's been maybe slapped together, it's like, oh, this is a Brian PKI. like Jake and I, we often go, oh, that's a Brian PKI, because we could tell from the documentation that's in place, the processes that are in place, even certain tendencies that you had with how HSMs were set up.
Yeah,
we're like, oh, that's a Brian PKI right there.
I've got a method.
It's kind of like going in and going, oh, this food tastes very familiar. I think I know who made this.
Yeah.
It very much be you. So a little bit of an accidental exposure to PKI. You started working with Microsoft on a consulting basis, but at some point you did your first PKI project for a customer.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of that? Like, how far back do you remember your first project?
That was in 2002, before it was still Whistler. And it was jumping in. Microsoft had a bunch of high-end customers come in for that 2821 course.
Yeah.
And I ended up consulting with a few of those companies.
Gotcha.
The biggest one I remember was Boeing.
Yeah.
Because remember, there used to be that key management server.
Yeah.
Right, which would archive keys. And 2003 was the first one that was going to allow archiving of keys at the CA.
Yeah.
And Boeing goes to us, so how long is it going to take to migrate this database? I said, it'll take as long as yours takes, because you are the test case.
Wow.
And they were like, what?
Yeah. Does give me an opportunity. I forgot we have not only you joining us here, but we have a special guest in our remote audience, your mom, Mrs. Komar. Hi, Mrs. Komar. She's joining to listen today as well. So is she fully trained up on PKI?
She has no clue what I do.
Okay, so we shouldn't talk too
my
much about
father
sales.
always asked when I'm going to be an actuary again.
Oh, okay. So someday you'll make something of yourself.
Yeah, someday.
When you're going to stop messing around with PKI. All right. No, sorry, Mrs. Komar. We sucked them into the PKI world. So, where we dropped off, we were just talking about your first PKI project. So you had done the 2821C course. Some customers had come, and then you had a consulting opportunity with one of them.
Yeah, basically, a few of the customers in that class became customers of mine or customers of Microsoft, where I was the consultant that came in.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because when I first started consulting with my own practice, even with Microsoft, 2821 was the first week.
Yeah.
So we would train the people, because a lot of people didn't know what PKI was. They still don't, to be honest.
Yeah.
But, the training set, at least they knew what questions to ask or how to answer when we got into the design phase.
Yeah.
Where should we put the groups?
Yeah.
Things like that.
The basic things, yeah.
Basic things, but at least the course would allow me to interject some things and say, okay, now based on what your Active Directory, I would go this way.
Yeah, yeah. So I know I have my favorite crazy things I've seen. Is there like an all-time craziest PKI problem or issue that still sticks with you today, where you either can't believe it happened or a customer had no idea what was going on? Is there something that you tell over cocktails to your friends?
Yeah, there's one customer who shall remain nameless.
Exactly, please.
Who shall remain nameless.
Yes.
But like I said, PKI is policy and process.
Yeah.
This company was issuing medium assurance
Yeah.
certificates. So what they did to make medium assurance is they said, well, we're going to have two one-time secrets. One that's sent to you. So
Yeah.
I'm the employee, I get half the secret.
Yeah.
And the other goes to my boss, you, Mark,
Yeah.
right? Now, the idea was I was supposed to meet with you. You were supposed to verify it was me.
Yeah.
And then you'd give me the second half of the secret. I would type that in and get my certificate.
Yeah.
The guy who ran the project, the actual guy who hired me, says, I didn't do that. I said, oh, what did you do? And he goes, well, what I did was I just phoned my manager, send me the other secret. And they did. They had issued 5,000 certificates. And I said, unfortunately, unless you can prove to me the other 4,999 were done correctly,
Yeah.
they're all invalid. We have to reissue them.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, no, no. And I said, go talk to legal.
Yeah.
And yeah, they had to issue all 5,000 certificates.
Yeah.
We did add a thing in there that they had to record the last three numbers of their employee card
Yeah.
just to prove just something that the person could put in, and also who did the verification. So if somebody wasn't doing it, well, maybe only 100 of the certs have to be reissued.
Yeah.
So, collection of information became a very important part of it. Right?
Yeah. And those policies and procedures, I mean, that's the part that's always the hardest for customers. And even when they spend the time to implement them during an architecture and initial phase of, we're going to have a CPS, for instance. Sorry, Mrs. Komar. We'll have these policies, we'll have all of this, but then having to follow it and remembering to follow it, that's the difficult thing, right?
Because a PKI is set up by one team, they're not necessarily going to be the team that continues to manage.
Yeah.
A mutual customer of ours. They ended up that the root CA actually had the cards and pins in a drawer attached to the root CA.
Yeah.
And nobody knew how it ended up there.
Yeah.
Just like
just happens.
We do just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Yeah. So, I mean, the good things is policies and procedures haven't really changed over the last 20 plus years. There's maybe refinement. I mean, I think some of the early days of obscurity, right? That was a big thing. Security through obscurity. Just hide it away, make it difficult to find. That's much harder in the era of cloud and integration. But what would you say has kind of changed over the last 20 years? Like what do things look different to you looking back compared to what you were doing 20 years ago? Well,
when we first did it, it was very individualized. So, for example, if you're using an HSM, you have tokens, you have USB tokens, you have smart cards, whatever, some kind of security control. We used to assign it to people.
Yeah.
So we'd say, okay, Marge, now you go with your card and type your PIN, and then Bob, you do it. I remember having a people and, having on camera where they had to come in from stage left, exit stage right, camera placed so you can't see what they typed the PIN. And then we started to realize that was bad.
Yeah.
Because Marge used the same PIN as her bank card and didn't want to give it to the next person. Stupid stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or they didn't like the next person. They wouldn't give them the card, or
Yeah.
they forgot. The person was fired. They're gone.
Yeah.
And that's where we started to move to let's have teams. There's a printed list of pins for the cards that went in a safe controlled by team A.
Yeah.
And then team B, they had the physical cards. Ideally, it's a husband and wife who are divorced, couldn't stand each other, who ran the two teams, but we had to adjust for that. And people being in different locations, right? It became much more global, where you had people in Israel who had to have their own cards because they had rules that any PKI had to be domiciled. The server had to be domiciled.
Sure.
There. Germany had some similar rules back then. And that was something. The biggest thing I've noticed now is the affinity. Everyone wants to move stuff to the cloud currently.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I'm getting out. I don't like the cloud. Cloud is just outsourcing, and you don't know where the hell things are.
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem for me was I always did high assurance PKIs. So there was always HSMs involved and root CAs. You can't move your root CA to the cloud.
Yeah.
No matter what your manager tells you, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Because you've lost control of the crypto device at that point.
Yeah. And I think you told me that you would tell prospective customers, I won't do your PKI if there's not a hardware security module involved.
Yeah, or you won't see me in person.
Yeah.
I'll just send you docs. I'm not going
because at that point, it's not a serious enough endeavor for them.
Yeah, it was not what I was known for, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to keep the brand was, if you need high assurance, you need high security,
Yeah.
you come to me. I did do many that were not, but those customers I never met face to face.
Yeah.
I don't even think I did a video call with them, to be honest. But
Yeah.
and that's the thing that's happening now, is that they're moving some HSMs to the cloud,
Yeah.
but they're not FIPS level 3, which
Yeah.
was another tenet. I wanted that FIPS level 3. The key material would be destroyed if there was a physical attack.
Yeah.
Well, how do you know if
How
it's a
you do
physical attack
exactly,
when it's in the
data center.
cloud, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, that's a great segue into the current state of PKI. What is your take on this cloud forward initiative across HSMs as a service that a lot of customers are asking about? There's CAs in the cloud, but then there's also PKI as a service, managed PKIs. I mean, there's all flavors of I want to pay someone else to solve part of a problem for me.
Yeah, it's a typical PKI problem that people don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
A lot of companies still say, "Oh, Bob, you're kind of security. You're in charge of the PKI." The guy's like, "I don't. This is a
I don't know
full-time
it.
job.
Yeah.
You've given me 20% of my time to do it. It's a full-time job." Um, I think there's a lot of people out there, as it's becoming a service. I think that's going to be good for some companies because they don't have that local
Yeah.
expertise.
Yeah.
Entrust does a great solution that ties in to Microsoft Active Directory.
Yeah.
It's like it's a Microsoft PKI. They have
Yeah.
their listener devices. They can issue the certs. Amazon does it. There's a bunch of good solutions
Yeah.
out there. To me, it's, what do you need? Are you just getting certs because a basic assurance?
Yeah.
If you can give me an account and a password, I'll give you a certificate.
Yeah.
I think 95% of people, customers, that's what they need.
Yeah.
They don't need that higher assurance. Like,
Yeah.
I need you to purchase over $100,000.
Mhm.
One I worked with in Australia, they were using smart cards to sign out armaments. It was a police service.
That's a significant thing.
So that really was a different level
Yeah.
that we needed, because they were signing out armaments with their smart cards. Well, different background checks, right?
Yeah.
That was important. So that was always my niche.
Yeah.
And I think for most companies, a service is going to work. And if you're designing today and you're not worrying about, you just don't want the HSM, but you want to use that crypto,
Yeah.
then those services are fine.
Yeah.
But I think if you built in-house 2010s,
Mhm.
20s, early 20s, and it was built to a certain level, make sure the vendor meets your standards that
Yeah.
you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's an important point. That I think what tends to happen is either our PKI scares me. I don't know what I have. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And there's more of a how do I get rid of this pain point, as opposed to how do I advance or do this better?
Yeah.
No one really says, hey, I'm looking for a PKI service so I can do this thing better, or I want
Yeah.
HSMs as a service or in the cloud because I'm trying to do this better. It's I'm afraid of what I have. I don't know what I have, or I don't want to deal with it. No
Yeah.
one is saying this is going to be better for me.
Well, here's a phrase that should scare you of HSM as a service.
Yeah.
We can back up your keys for you.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
The keys are the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah.
If you can back it up and you have a rogue employee, they can issue certs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was why, remember, thinking back, you can't be a local administrator
Yeah.
on the server when you use
Yeah.
software keys. That's why our company, Paul Adair, got to mention Paul.
Yeah.
Paul and I consulted together for 10 years as Identity Inc. And that was a huge tenet.
Yeah.
That's why we always sold HSMs, because how many people were local administrators?
Yeah.
I remember working for an oil company. We targeted a server saying, okay, if we put in this domain, you want to use software certs. It was over 600 people
Yeah.
who could export the key because they
Yeah.
were all local administrators on that server.
Yeah. And I think an interesting thing too, as we're talking about this, is I know at least two of the leading, there's only so many, two of the leading HSM manufacturers that now have as a service, also kind of covertly have a program, a break glass program, where historically, if you had keys for your, say, CA protected in an HSM, you could pay an exorbitant fee for them to come out and extract those keys for you out of the hardware. So now if they are running the hardware for you, as a service, and they have the ability to extract keys. We don't quite have a lot of that same integrity around
Yeah.
keys anymore.
And that's the whole idea, especially if you're just with basic assurance, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're protecting the keys from administrators, but if you are getting where you need the medium high assurance, that type of thing,
Yeah.
it becomes an issue.
I think this is a great question that we got here, or at least a comment. It said, I noticed a lot of organizations started PKI with really serious ambitions, and then leadership kind of loses interest. And I know I've kind of seen this at our customers where we've trained 3, 4, 5, 6 people and spent months creating a certificate policy and practice statement and implementing PKI. And these are not certs just to get on Wi-Fi. Like these are in the electrical grid, like for smart meters and transmission control systems. And people get promoted, people move into new places. Once that laser focus is taken off, quickly those policies start changing, or no one follows them in different skill sets. I imagine you've seen that over the years as well.
I have. And that's where you've got to go to them saying, what is important? If the values of the company have changed, what is your current version of the CPCPS? It's a document. It's a policy document.
Yeah.
So you can rewrite it.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But just tell me you rewrote it, and we'll go to what you've rewritten.
Yeah.
But if there is a shift in the organization, that's fine.
Yeah.
Just make sure. Remember, once you lower security, you can't build it back up.
Yeah.
You start at a level
you can't
and
undo
you can maintain.
the past.
You can always go lower security, but you can't come up.
Yeah.
We were sharing before this. I had a customer who came to me and said, I need to move my keys to an HSM. I have an audit coming next week.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked to read their CPS, and notice this is the Bible for PKI.
Yeah.
It said keys must be generated in hardware. I refused to even work with a customer because I said, you didn't generate them in hardware. I'm not going to put them in hardware for you so that you can pass an audit because you're lying. And I would be helping you with it. So I can't do that because I would lose all my street cred on that point.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I often tell customers, and I would probably highly advocate, is there will be attrition of skills. There will be the new shiny object that leadership goes to.
Yeah.
I think I would like to see people who are involved in the initial setup of these kind of have a little bit of a sense of ownership of, hey, if I'm moving to a new job or I'm leaving the organization, I need to find a new champion behind, right? You can't just assume the organization's going to pick it up, because these are abstract things. They're policies, they're procedures, it's documentation. If no one knows it's there, no one bothers to look at it, you quickly fall out of compliance to it.
Well, I'm running into this now because I've been doing it for so many years. The guys I trained up initially are retiring.
Oh, absolutely. So you're retiring.
I'm retiring, but this sounds bad. I do care, but a lot of them don't give a damn because I'm retiring.
Yeah.
So they're taking that attitude of, I'm retiring, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to get your perspective on, I hear this all of the time, and the mantra hasn't really changed over the last 20 years, which is kind of ironic given what it is. And it's this constant, Microsoft PKI is going away, Microsoft's not adding it. And this tends to get pitched by the purveyors of FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The people who have an alternative thing that they're trying to get your dollar. Come buy this PKI as a service, come buy this managed PKI. Somebody who has something financially to gain is out there saying, well, Microsoft is no longer doing PKI. It's going to be gone from the product. I know I've heard that since Server 2012, because there wasn't really anything significant that was added to the product in Server 2012. Like 8 was the last time. So things haven't changed, but
A
what
12
do you
added
think?
SEP says first,
There's minor
and then
things,
they
right?
fixed it in R2.
Exactly. But it's continued to work, and I think the beautiful thing is it still meets all the modern. Nothing has changed in PKI.
No.
If we look back, this concept was developed decades ago. And nothing has really significantly changed other than new algorithms or key sizes. So what do you think of this FUD factor and Microsoft and, how did you communicate this? How did you tell your mom that your career, 10 years ago is still viable? Because I know for a while when I was leaving Microsoft, my wife thought and asked me, are you sure that this isn't a technology that was dying? Because my boss at Microsoft didn't understand what I did.
Well, this is the thing, is that the high-end PKI consultant has kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Um, all these technologies come out and they use certificates. And everybody forgets you need a PKI to issue those certificates. So what I'm finding is it's become easy. Microsoft is here to stay.
Yeah.
Because it's part of the OS.
Yeah.
It's free, right? Now, it's not necessarily free for the deployment of it, the management of it, but the purchase of the software.
Yeah.
All you have to buy is a server license. That's it. Standard. Remember, you used to have to buy
the standard or enterprise. And,
you had to buy the higher end one to get the Microsoft PKI, but it has become part of the standard. Yes, it hasn't changed. I wish there was more things it can do, but in some ways that I also shuddered because all they tried to do was make it easier that made it harder when things messed up.
Yeah. And I think that's the one place where at least the Microsoft ecosystem has been reasonably effective. No, there are CLM products that help get certificates out of the PKI and onto endpoints. Great problem to solve. I know, for us, PKI Spotlight, we're trying to solve the operations of the PKI, but the underlying product hasn't changed and doesn't need to change. It's what people now need to do is different. And I know from a security perspective, a lot of what I think we both looked at, we talked about security controls and policies and procedures, but there wasn't ever necessarily established threats like petit potems. And now we've got Spectre Ops where they're very recipe-driven, very clearly documented attack vectors against PKI.
Yeah.
It was theoretical to some degree. You should make sure you do this right so that these things can't be found. Well, now they're very well publicized. So security is a big issue now.
It is. But, when I think of the actual breakdowns that have happened, it's been a shitty administrator password that still gets you.
Yeah, exactly.
So, one of the strengths is part of the OS. One of the weaknesses is part of the OS.
Yeah.
So you still have that administrative issue. My whole thing is I tried to never use an enterprise admin account unless I absolutely had to, which was Endes. I think that was the only service I could think of.
Yeah.
And I think SEP says installation you had to.
Yeah.
Those are the only two that you had to still.
Yeah, exactly. If we kind of talk about the future a little bit, I'm interested in your perspective on a couple of things. We've had some questions come in. As you are kind of looking into your retirement, you don't have to deal a little bit with the future of PKI, but I have to imagine you at least have thoughts about maybe where things are going. Or maybe it's been a little easier for you to disconnect. Like, are you thinking about what post-quantum is going to mean for your customers? Let's start there. What are your thoughts on this whole post-quantum computing and impact on the world?
I don't know. Let's even go before that, just with elliptical curves and everything. Like we were talking before the session. I've had one customer, one in all the 20-something years of consulting that actually deployed elliptical curve PKI, where we had a separate route, we had separate issuing CAs, because we were fine with the SHA 256. It worked for all the business that they needed. This was a very specialized customer. They had a very small footprint that they needed to put the certificates in. So that's why they moved to elliptical curve. Something that was 2048 bits and having a chain with 4096, 2048, it was too big of a package.
I know we would see some interest from customers. And as soon as we started talking about, well, do you know what the compatibility of the system is? It's one thing to have your PKI creating an RSA key or an elliptical curve key. And then ultimately is, okay, all the places that are going to use or trust or rely on these certificates, will they support that? And there was a big unknown. That's no different with post-quantum, right? Is I could go buy a post-quantum resistant algorithm, put it into my PKI today, I'm gonna have all those same compatibility, and we've been
Yeah.
dealing with that compatibility
Well, even
question
when
for
SHA-1
decades.
to SHA-2 was
Yeah,
a big one, right? And they
yeah,
had to do a patch for Windows XP post-patch period
yeah,
to get it to even recognize a SHA-2
yeah,
signature, right? So we, I think I will move it faster to the cloud, probably, but I
yeah,
think everything's moving it to the cloud.
yeah,
I've kind of given up. I like hybrid clouds.
yeah.
They're both local and remote, but
Hmm.
you know, we used to just hunt for enterprise CA sitting on the internet,
Yeah,
see if we can get a cert out of them.
yeah, yeah. I think there's definitely environments that we talk to that just don't have the institutional desire or budget or capabilities to do PKI the right way. And their
Yeah,
options are, I can either do this in a really bad way that's going to be insecure and unreliable, or I can go buy this thing in the cloud
yeah,
that
and the
probably isn't
services,
as secure as it could be, but it may be better than what they have, but
and
they're
the,
going to pay more for it.
and they've improved. Like
Yeah.
from what I remember when I first looked at some of these cloud PKIs as services, they were a joke.
Yeah.
It just, basically it was big enterprise root CA
Yeah.
in there. And then I remember working at a customer where they were using, I think it was Entrust, an Entrust PKI that tied in. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
It did, you were designing certificate templates, you're doing everything. It really made it easier. And
Yeah.
it was a really neat, eye-opening moment.
Yeah.
Working with the Java AG.
Hmm. EJBC. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that product.
Yeah.
It's so the bottom line is if you're in PKI, it's a standard.
Yeah.
Why has Microsoft PKI kept on going? Because X509 v3 has not
Yeah. It hasn't
changed.
changed. Yeah.
That standard is low changes to it.
Hmm.
SafeNet, they were the big ones. I remember. Well, now let's just say the Luna HSMs,
Yeah.
whoever, now they're owned by
Yeah. The Luna is now Talus.
Talus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, got to be careful with Talus because
Yeah.
nobody knows
Yeah.
what
Talus.
HSM you're talking about.
What logo is on the box?
Box,
Now I'll
yeah.
tell you what. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
because you have the Talus logo on both an Encipher and
Well,
a
it's like, does it have an
SafeNet.
Enfer and Cipher?
Yeah.
Then yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's always the confusion.
But they were ones that too rigidly followed the standards. Because I remember they were arguing whether you can use a 4096-bit or a 2048-bit under FIPS level 3.
Yeah.
And we'd have a 4096-bit key was working.
Yeah.
And if you patched it, all of a sudden it wouldn't work because they said, 2048-bit's the maximum for FIPS level 3. You can't do 4096. And people would have to roll back the patches to make their PKI work.
Yeah.
And they were just too fast at following potential changes that were always slapped down because it's deployed. You can't backtrack, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That stuff isn't easily undone at all.
Yeah.
So from the cloud perspective, there's certainly alternatives that companies can look at. I know one of the things I talk to customers about is when they kind of bring up the subject of cloud and manage PKIs. I go, here's an interesting thing when you pull back the covers. The technology that these cloud providers are running isn't all that much different than what these customers could run.
Yeah.
And I know when we started working on PKI Spotlight, we actually talked to a number of these managed PKI companies. They don't have tools. Like they have the same lack of visibility and struggle with the operations.
Yeah.
Like they're running some of this stuff with scripts. So it isn't like this panacea of, they've solved all these problems.
No.
It's just obscured behind an invoice. And some of the stuff they figured out, some of they haven't, but none of them are necessarily doing real-time security or real-time alerting. They're scanning the stuff as if they did it. So they have expertise. So it is a little bit of like the man behind the curtain sort of a thing.
Well, and I think a big question you still have to ask, and I said to any company that says they want to move to this system, is ask them, if I fall out of love with your company, how do I move that PKI to this cloud service?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because are you going to be able to extract the keys? Portability, because you're going to move them.
Yep.
Or what if that company goes bankrupt, gets taken over?
Or we see it all the time of, Google Cloud has announced that thing is being retired, or Microsoft Azure is retiring this. So other than PKI, what's the future hold for you? You're going into retirement. You're not going to have to think about certificates and CPs and CPSs, maybe more time with your mom, but like what's the future hold for you?
Golf.
Yeah.
I belong to 2 golf clubs. I belong in Kelowna at Kelowna Golf and Country Club, and then in Tucson at Mountain View Preserve Golf Club.
Yeah.
And my newest thing to conquer is Golf Genius.
Well, I was just going
How
to
to
say,
program tournaments.
I remember a conversation that you and I had a couple months ago, because I came down and visited you in Tucson, and we spent a couple minutes talking about some of your build scripts and systems that you had built to help you run your business over the years. And then the talk turned to your golf side, and you had a whole other piece of software that you're now learning how to master.
Yeah.
So you're just going from one software complexity to the other.
Well,
It's all about running golf tournaments for your leagues.
actually, it's even more basic than that. I'm writing documentation, how to configure it. So I'm taking my PKI stuff and I'm moving it to golf
Yeah.
now. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's, golfing. My
Yeah.
wife and I love e-biking.
Yeah.
We go out for long rides with our friends Dale and Colleen.
Yeah.
That's the panacea.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the other future things we have to talk about, and I'm surprised we haven't got any questions about, and this is a great topic that kind of goes back to the past, current, and future. I know that I still to this day get ongoing questions about when there's going to be a new PKI book.
When's the next version of the book?
When's the next book going to come out? And I know some of this was when I started PKI Solutions 10 years ago. I mean, you were well into your career at this point, but 10 years ago, we had started the collab, and I think I had even posted on my blog, hey, Brian and I are working on a 2012 book.
Yeah.
Or this is, sorry, 16. It was going to be 2016 book. And that blog still gets hit every once in a while. I get questions. I imagine.
I get emails monthly still.
Yeah.
When is the next version of the book?
Yeah.
Well, I'm here to announce something. Mark Cooper is taking over the book.
Yes. So Brian and I are working to handle things behind the scenes. You'll have some involvement.
Yep.
But not having to do the day-to-day writing.
No, might be doing some tech editing.
There you go. That would be great. And I think you committed to writing the foreword.
Yep.
All right. So once we get that squared away, we will work on getting an updated book. So I will no longer have to compete with golf and PKI distracting you from the book.
Yeah, it just, you know what? As a one-man shop, it was impossible to write a book.
I can appreciate that.
The hours, just to tell your wife, give her this warning. The best writing hours are 12 to 5 a.m. And you got to fit in sleep somehow. But
well, I know we had a couple of questions that came in. I believe one that we had earlier is someone asking if they wanted to get into PKI, and they were maybe fairly new to the space. Do they make the jump? Is it worth going into? Is there a future for PKI, whether it's Microsoft or otherwise? Is it here to stay? Is it a worthwhile place to get into?
I believe that there's still careers out there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you would start, like you and I did.
Yeah.
We both had training, even like I learned from the product group.
Yeah.
And then kind of fell into this consulting.
Yeah.
You were doing Microsoft support and we're doing PKI support. And eventually they kind of said, well, there's no need to support it. It's easy now.
Yeah.
And you created PKI Solutions.
Yeah.
And there's other competitors of ours out there. I think finding a company that's into it so you can learn more.
Yeah.
Get your hands into it, decide whether you're going to be doing a policy process role, a coding role, because there's different sides. There's all sorts of careers in PKI.
Yeah. I think, there's definitely avenues to learn. We've got training programs that we do online. There's certainly free training programs. There's hopefully an updated book soon.
Yeah.
So there's definitely ways to learn, and there's probably not the precipice of I have to fully jump in. You could certainly learn, because anything that you're going to do in cybersecurity is going to have some component that interacts with certificates, or even if you choose to go into firewalls or AI, there's going to be a PKI dependency somewhere along the way. And having a background or knowledge is there. I think ultimately is, do I want to go into the deep end and only do PKI?
I start off as a firewall guy in IT. Actually, I was a computer support person. I was the guy when the computer didn't work, I came to your desk and helped.
It is a hard and very specialized place to say, I'm only going to do PKI. Like that you could go really deep like we do.
Yeah.
And now I have to say, I used to know a lot about Active Directory. I used to know a lot about firewall. I couldn't do that today because
No.
I've forgotten it all. It's all been replaced with minutia of PKI.
Yeah, when Windows 2000 came out, I would do sessions on DFS
Yeah.
and OUs
Yeah.
and group policy.
Yeah,
And
yeah. There's a great perennial question. What about ACME? New enrollment protocol. I know I have my opinion. Did you ever formulate whether you would expect Microsoft to embrace the ACME enrollment protocol?
I think if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be a third party.
Yeah.
I don't see Microsoft really does not have resources
Yeah.
adding things
Yep.
to PKI, but it's well documented. You can build an interface. Just think of it. It's another service like SEPSAs, NDES.
Yeah.
It's a front end. There's going to be a Babelfish, for lack of a better, that's going to translate between it.
I think the challenge is that's all about helping third-party stuff integrate, and there's no incentive to Microsoft. I mean,
No.
that is, hey, we've got NDIS, which is the SCEP protocol. You can write to that. It may be older, but it works.
Yeah.
And there's no financial incentive. So
NCEP says an open protocol, which you can use, which
exactly
is even, to me, far better because it has security built in.
Yeah. So I think it is, where's the financial incentive is third parties.
Yeah, that's what I see.
The other question we got here was around, is it really the bad actor or threat that is really the problem in PKI, or is it the implementation, the architecture, following up on policies and procedures? So is it self-inflicted, or is it really the bad actors that cause
I think it's more self-inflicted. When things happen, it's a breakdown in management.
Yeah.
What was that Dutch company, the one that went under?
DigiNotar.
Yeah, DigiNotar.
Yeah, DigiNotar.
Yeah, they went down and under because ultimately they had a poor administrative password that brought down an entire trusted root of the internet.
Yeah.
To me, it's always going to be something was done wrong.
Yeah.
The same hacker who hacked DigiNotar actually went after one of my customers.
Oh, wow.
And I had to audit all 200,000 certificates that were issued to find. And the person actually got onto a server that they shouldn't have, but they didn't realize what they'd gotten onto.
Yeah.
So they never issued any bad certificates.
Yeah. Well, I think, from the policies and procedure side, we see the same thing again. Like right now, we're now dealing with Intrust that was recently communicated by Google is going to be removed from the trust store for not following established public CA procedures for issuance. This isn't the first time. It happened several years ago when Symantec had VeriSign.
Yep.
Essentially the same thing. You're going to get removed from the trust store. That business is effectively worthless if you're not in a trusted space. It had to get sold off to DigiCert. Intrust is in that same place. So policies, procedures, I think that gets the big guys as well as the small ones. Well, I know since we're kind of celebrating your retirement, you've had a really successful career, and you had some thank yous to people that kind of helped get you to where you are and really ready to go play golf. But I think you had some thank yous you wanted to shout out.
So this is going to be kind of going through my career, but first three guys I want to thank are Greg Matthew, Dave Chase, and Johnson Smith, high school teachers.
Wow.
Yeah, Greg was my computer science teacher, 1980s, master of computer science.
Yeah.
Teaching me how to program in Pascal.
Yeah.
But giving me foundations. And Dave and Johnson were my English teachers. They taught me how to write.
Yeah.
And as a technical writer, that was huge. I want to thank Pat Garlick, the first guy who hired me into IT from being an actuary.
Yeah.
He took the chance on me, and Tom Ploquin, good friend of mine now, also retired, who pushed me into it, saying, "You should be in IT. Why are you not in there? You're good." I want to thank Nancy Marajolio and Stephanie Layton. They were acquisition editors at Macmillan, who got me first as an editor and then got me writing computer books. Andreas Luther and Nadine Kano, those two are the catalyst.
Yeah.
They got me into Microsoft as a contractor. Great friends, great people, wonderful. Got me into Microsoft. Paul Howard, my first boss at Microsoft, And Ryan Califato, the guy who I met in the hallways of Microsoft, said, dude, shoes are optional. But, he showed me the way, and he became a speaker manager at Tech Ed and
Yeah.
would fly me all over the world to speak, and
Yeah.
Nadine too. David Cross, can't forget
Yeah.
David. He and I set up that PKI team, and I was his trusted soldier to get things out there. I want to thank Kristen McCarthy Lowe and Rob Dupree, two people you need to meet.
Mm-hmm.
Rob did all the graphics for the PKI book,
all right.
and Kristen was the editor.
Yeah.
And those two great friends, fantastic people. Lori Wohler got me my start in PKI consulting with Security Center of Excellence. Can't forget Paul Adair, 10 years
Paul.
working together. I want to thank my wife, Krista, who put up with me traveling 3 over every 4 weeks. My parents, my dad, he's passed, but he had no idea what I was doing, but he gave me a solid business background from his own small business.
Wow.
And want to thank you and Nick for setting this up.
Oh, absolutely. It's as I said, it's an honor to have you here. And actually, we put a little something together to. No, there's no PKI body out there, so we'll just anoint ourselves. But we got you a Lifetime Achievement in PKI Excellence Award.
Wow.
That we wanted to make sure that when you are off doing your golf tournaments, that you don't forget us. Fighting the good battle in the PKI space. So wanted to at least make sure that you knew everything that you had done. It was appreciated.
And thanks for not spelling my name Brain.
So I hope everybody really enjoyed this opportunity to come celebrate Brian and his contributions in the space. It's been decades of marvelous work. Glad we can finally put to rest that. Maybe we'll get a new book out there.
Yeah.
We'll find a way to make sure everybody finds out about that. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks, Brian, for coming along. We have a couple of things I want to point out. One is Brian is going to sign a very exclusive and difficult to find copy of his book. And we're going to take that book and we're going to raffle it to one of our attendees to the webinar. So we'll get that sent out. The team will be following up on that. A couple other things I want to do is, if you're not already following us, PKI Solutions on LinkedIn or X, formerly Twitter, please do so. We have a couple of promotions coming along. We had a lot of interest from our June PKI Insights, where we announced a training promotion. So we do have a free course that's going on. There'll be a QR code that you can scan, or you can email us, hello@pkisolutions.com. Or you can go to our website and send us a Learn PKI message, and you'll be entered for access to one of our training courses. So we're glad that we got a lot of demand, so we're going to extend that out. And for August, our next webinar, something, Brian, you're going to probably be on the golf course at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Don't have to worry about, but we're going to talk PKI and what post-quantum computing really means. So join us for our next webinar in August. Brian, once again, thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
See you.